call to order this regular council meeting, or resume this regular council meeting of Monday, October 22nd. And it is the public hearing portion of our meeting, but we also have very special presentation for outstanding achievement in the swim meet, provincial swim meet. So welcome to the Sockeyes. And we have some certificates here and city pins, and we really want to honor you for your accomplishments. Also, to say to the parents and the swim coaches, none of this would happen without your participation. The parents have to get them there on time, get them to the meets, and I know it's not easy, and so your dedication to your children's physical health and even exercise is good for our mental health. So really appreciate what the parents do, and they're bringing their kids out here, and the dedication, and also to the coaches. Wow, of course nobody could do that without the coaches. So we have some certificates here, and I think we might as well we'll come down, and then we'll call each child up, or each youth up, and give them their certificate and a city pin, and if you want to take a picture, that would be the perfect time. So we'll go on down.
Thank you, and congratulations to all of the swimmers. And for those of you with development applications who have been here the last 2 weeks, you've seen baseball players and soccer players, and now we have swimmers. So it's great to have provincial champions. I'm glad I got this certificate because this young man probably could have won it for a number of sports, but I'd like to call out Matthew Bushell. Matthew, congratulations. Division 5 boys, first in 100 back, second in 100 free, third in the 50 free. Congratulations, Matthew. I know how much you enjoy this kind of stuff. So you shake hands and you want to take a photo.
Thanks to watching the Olympics, I know what all of these are. I can't do any of them, but Julianne Moore finished first in the 50 free, first in the 100 free, second in the 50 fly, which really looks tough. Like, that looks like the toughest thing to do. It's like, oh man. Third in the 200 IM, first in the free relay, third in the medal relay. Like, whoa, way to go.
I'm absolutely thrilled to call out Emma Levins. Division 6, third 50 free, third 100 free, third in the 100 breaststroke, first in the free relay, and third in the medley relay.
Delighted to present to Chantal Jeffrey, who was first in the 200 IM, first in the 100 free, first in the 100 fly, and first in the 50 fly. Boy, you can really fly. Okay, come on down here and we can... Oh, flying. Yes, okay. Whoa. And this one's for Claire Hall. Is Claire here? Claire, congratulations. First in the 50 free, first in the 100 free, first in the 50 fly, first in the 100 fly, first in the free relay, and third in the medley relay. I can hardly say that without losing my breath. I can't believe you did it all. Good job. Oh, yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Here you go. All right, is someone taking a picture? Congratulations.
Outstanding achievement in winning for Abby Bushel. Division 7 girls first free relay and 7 girls third medley relay. Congratulations. Here you go. That's yours.
Okay, and the last award, congratulations, goes to Tyler Bushel. And Tyler, Division 6 boys, third 50 free. And I've known Tyler since he was that big. He was a former neighbor of Tyler and Matthew. And knowing the family quite well, there's absolutely no doubt which parent gave them this athletic ability. Oh, sorry, I lied, not the last one. Now this person, I don't know her since she was little. Division 4 girls, third regional relay, Kaylee Vickers? Callie. See, now that's not English language. It's got an I in there. Callie Vickers. Is Callie here? Not here. Congratulations, Callie. And congratulations to all of you. Reading about you guys in the paper is exciting. Following you is fun, and congrats. I think most of you, as Councillor Harrison said, are multi-sport. I know the Bushel boys are. And again, great talent from your mom, guys.
So would all the award winners like to come up, and we'll take a group picture with the council? So go ahead and come forward. Yeah. There you go. That's fine. So that's the fun part of our evening, and we always enjoy having the youth here and being able to congratulate them, and we're so proud of them, so that's great. Now we're at the hearing portion of our meeting. I have a statement to read out, and then we'll move on from there. So I'd like to open up the hearing for variance permit 481, variance permit 483, 484, and 485, and development permit 421. Following the reading of the motion by the CAO, I will ask the Director of Development Services to explain the development. I will ask 3 times for submissions from the gallery, giving the opportunity for the applicant and the public to speak. Council will have opportunity to ask questions. Once this is complete, I will close the hearing and council will vote on this motion. Chief Administrative Officer,
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 22.1 is variance permit 481 for the property at 1560 Lakeshore Road Northeast.
Development Services?
And I'll just read the motion. First, Your
okay,
Worship,
sorry.
moved by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Harrison, that VP 481 be authorized for issuance for Lot 1, Plan EPP 61880 to vary subdivision and development servicing bylaw number 4163 as follows. Waive the requirement to upgrade the east half of Lakeshore Road Northeast for the entire frontage of the subject property. Waive the requirement to upgrade the water main from 100 millimeter in diameter to 150 millimeters along the southern boundary of the subject property. And waive the requirement to extend the storm sewer main on 16th Street Northeast, subject to registration of a Section 219 covenant to prohibit further subdivision of and access to the remainder as shown in the Appendix 6 of the staff report dated October 2nd.
Development Services?
Your Worship, this is a development variance permit application related to a subdivision application, which was filed earlier this year by the Mr. and Mrs. Gom. And this is the aerial photo that was sent to the neighboring properties as a public notice, and it summarizes what is being applied for. So the first variance is to waive the requirement to upgrade the east half of the Lakeshore Road frontage of the subject property. The property fronts onto two roads, Lakeshore Road and 16th Street Northeast, where it turns into 15th Avenue. The second variance proposed is to waive the requirement to upgrade the water main from 100 millimeter diameters to 150 millimeter diameters along this stretch of a dedicated trail from 16th down to Lakeshore Road. And these servicing requirements are triggered by the subdivision application. The third variance request is to not have to extend the city storm sewer main from approximately this location here on the map, approximately 30 meters to this portion, this corner of the property. And related to that is the proposed two-lot subdivision, proposed Lot A and proposed Lot B. The other thing I should mention is the applicants have agreed to register a covenant on the property on the remainder. I should go back to the subdivision plan. The covenant would be registered on the remainder, and it would say no further subdivision or access from Lakeshore Road until all the servicing requirements are met, including upgrading Lakeshore Road and the water main. The applicants are in attendance, and the applicant's agent, Nicole Bird from Brown Johnson, is here as well.
Okay, so I will be calling 3 times for submissions, starting with the applicants. Would the applicant like to speak, or their agent?
Your Worship and Councillors.
Go ahead and turn it back to you.
My name is Nicole Bird. I'm a land surveyor with Brown Johnson Land Surveyors. Just to speak to this application, we just feel the variances along Lakeshore Road and the water main, specifically Lakeshore Road, that's not where the development is happening. We're proposing 2 lots off of 15th Avenue Northeast. And as for the water main line, there's adequate servicing for both of these lots off of 15th Avenue. We just feel it's onerous to have to upgrade that entire line. And as for the storm sewer main extension, the way the topography is for this property, the proposed house sites for these 2 lots are going to be sitting quite a bit lower than this storm main extension line, and likely they won't be able to connect into this line. And so that was the reason for the variance request on that. It's also across the road from where they are. So.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? We're hearing none right now, so you can have a seat. We may have questions later. So calling for a second time for submissions. Anybody want to speak to this? Please come forward. Just state your name and residential address.
My name is Tom Peasgood. I live at 1461 16th Street. So I am the first house near to the park. So that blue, that's our place there. So the first two aren't myself and the neighbors that would affect. We're not totally concerned about the Lakeshore Road as much as in the upgrading of the water main. We feel that those things that, even though they've been required by the city, they've been triggered by their subdivision, that in all due diligence, they should be upgrading those anyways, like the other folks at the end of our street have been doing and spending a lot of money doing it that way. Our bigger concern is at the corner where the storm sewer is. And I did send council photos of the rainstorm we had 2 weeks past, and we actually had water going right down my driveway and my neighbor's driveway. And we are within 30 meters at the crown of that to where I don't have the fancy little hand arrow here, but in front of that truck, you can see the crown of the water around the corner where the yellow light is. That's at that corner is where they're suggesting there should no, the second water storm sewer should not be upgraded. We did have a meeting on site with the city engineer last week in person with myself and Mother neighbor Bob. He's with me as well tonight. So the water going down his driveway is a driveway on the left. Mine's the one being flooded. It actually went right down my driveway and right up against my house. So, and his went down enough that if it would have come up another couple more inches, it would have flooded his basement. So the concern is that at that far corner, it'll be the same challenge, the same issue, because it's the same water, the same program coming down 15th Street into that corner, which then may carry over back in toward my property as well. We know from talking to the engineer last week that the city did do massive upgrades on that previous corner. If you go back, that one slide, that map there. One more, keep going. So where the arrow is, where the number 15 is, in the middle of the picture there, we know that, that the city did do a bunch of upgrades there years ago, but they still know that these storm sewers and drains in front of my property, my neighbor's property, and right down to the corner need to be completely redone and upgraded as well, as those photos as well have shown. So that's our concern. Our biggest concern is we don't want to, if there's another storm the next 10 years, we've been there for 20 seasons now. That's like a one every 10 to 20 season storm. We don't want that to continue, and we don't want to deal with those challenges and be back here hand in hat while our houses have been flooded. The other challenge is that, talking to the engineer, I don't know the details, this is slowly starting to slide these properties toward Lakeshore, and there's other challenges on Lakeshore, which I know the city's aware of. So again, these all start from up top. I'm not a water guy. I'm not pretending to be a water guy and to understand the engineering of hydration. But when I do understand water against my house, and I know that's not a good thing. Did you guys have any questions?
Yeah. Do we have any questions for this speaker? Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and thanks for coming and speaking with us. So just in hearing your presentation, the biggest concern that you have as far as variances go, and the one that's like you're worried about affecting you, is that storm sewer main extension from that yellow line basically to the edge of the property, just before that 1490
Correct.
sign. Okay, all right, I understand. Thank you very much.
Do we have any further questions for this speaker? Here, none. Go ahead and have a seat. Calling again for submissions. Anyone else want to come and speak to this? Did the applicant have something they wanted to say? You're looking kind of like...
Is it okay if I come? I guess I'd just like to speak to the storm main directly. What they're proposing here isn't going to be adding any more groundwater, more than what's already coming into the ground. What's existing now. What it might do is concentrate the water a little bit more because of the footprint of the building. It might be concentrated, but in speaking to an engineer, there are ways to mitigate this groundwater, possibly allowing roof leader driveway water be permitted to splash pads and disposed of on the surface, whereas perimeter drains could be dealt with in rock pits. So I think this concentrated stormwater can be dealt with through engineering means. I don't think we're going to be introducing any more water than that's already there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Bob Verovi, live at 1441 16th Street. Regarding this storm drain and all that, from what I read in the papers here, that they want to waive any fees contribution to the storm on that, in that section. And if we waive the fees, city council's gonna have to come up with some money later on to put towards mitigating the water problem we're having now on the street. So if it was done now, we don't have to pay for it later, the taxpayer.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for this person? No? Okay.
Thanks, Bob. Could I just, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, Bob, he did have a question for you.
I can't let you come up and not ask you a question. So, Bob, your concern is, like, what they're required to do is they're required to extend that storm main from where it's at now to the edge of that red property line if you draw it across.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So what your concern is that if they don't make a contribution to that, that piece won't get done.
Well, yes, basically yes, because we're having the water problem coming down 16th now, where it's, you've seen the pictures, and that would be another 30 meters closer to maybe take care of this water problem before it's too late.
Okay, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn, you had a question?
Yeah,
for
just
staff?
related to the last two presenters, and thank you for your presentations, but this is for staff. And I think the last presenter kind of summarized it, but just to be clear, staff's intent is for that to get done this year, is that correct? Whether it's paid for by this development or by waiving it and having it spread among all the taxpayers. Am I correct in that?
Director of
No.
Engineering?
No, your worship, the intent is to have the developer pay for it.
I know
and
that's
install it
staff,
this
yeah,
year.
but the,
If council waives that requirement, it's up to council to bring it to budget.
okay. And also, so I'm clear, on the other side of the road where the blue line is, there will be significant frontage improvements on the road there, is that correct? Paid for by this developer?
That's correct. The developer's responsible for their side of the road, but also the infrastructure in the road, which includes, it doesn't matter what side of the road it's on, they're required to do the storm works. Sewer
And just so
water.
I'm clear, staff's recommendation is to accept the other two variances, but not this one.
That's correct, yeah. We would like to see the frontage improvements done, but waiving the water main
Okay, thank you.
major.
Okay. Just a minute, do we have any further submissions?
I'd just like to mention that these applicants are looking at $30,000 in road costs for these upgrades, plus the engineering of 15% and contingencies. So their development isn't without expense, plus their development cost charges. So just want to make a point that they're not getting away without doing anything.
Thank you. Councillor Lyson, did you?
Yeah, thanks. I have a question for staff. These types of things are never easy. So the planning department and the engineering department have both talked about the lake, and I'm not going to talk about the storm right now, but I want to talk about the lake shore variances that they're requesting or to be waived. Can you tell me a little bit about the covenant and what was requested by staff and what's being proposed in lieu?
So as far as the covenant goes, the applicants agree to register a covenant on the remainder property here, saying that the remainder can't be subdivided in the future until Lakeshore Road is fully upgraded to the standard of the day, whatever that standard may be. And we're talking half the road from center line, not the entire road, which is the same scenario as on 16th Street. Although the estimate is for 100%, don't confuse that with being 100% of the full road width. It's from center line to the property boundary. So staff agree, or we support what the applicants are requesting for a variance, except staff believe the storm main extension should not be waived. We're not trying to be punitive here. We understand the costs are, fairly high for a 2-lot subdivision. These are large lots. And the other thing that hasn't really been talked about is if these 2 lots do not connect to the city storm sewer, then a geotechnical engineer needs to do a detailed report in accordance with the city's terms of reference. And our city engineer has concerns with on-site stormwater disposal. So we don't know if it's possible to have on-site storm here.
Okay, so it may be required that storm is required, the storm extension is required, or holding tanks and pumping type thing, or
if a geotechnical engineer doesn't come up with a design that meets our terms of reference for on-site storm disposal, then there'd be no other option than to connect to the city storm sewer.
Okay, and at the time of, generally speaking, at the time of subdivision, this is when we talk about road dedications and right-of-ways, and tell me more about the covenant that's the 219 that's being suggested for the remainder, as opposed to being able to get that land or get that road right-of-way at this time.
I see. So during our discussions, I believe it was back in August, we proposed the idea of the applicants volunteering to place a road reserve covenant, 10 meter wide, along the western edge of the property. And that road reserve would be in place in the event that the city ever needs to widen out Lakeshore Road due to the overall geotechnical concerns of Lakeshore Road. And a report on that was presented to council at the planning committee meeting last week. And our city engineer identified this area as one of the areas susceptible to Mr. Neuenhausen can probably explain it a little better than I can, but risks associated with landslides.
Okay. And will the geotechnical report about the stormwater take into consideration the city geotechnical report of the same?
Your worship, any geotech working on this particular site will have access to our reports.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
So just before we go on to any other questions from council, I wanted to make sure, is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this? Okay, hearing none. And did we have any further questions for staff, Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, just to follow up to Councillor Lyson's question. The extension of the storm on 15th, if that happens, and we'll determine who pays for it, staff's recommending the developer, council has the opportunity to waive that if they want. If that happens, that's not going to solve lots A and B's storm situation, is it? Because as far as I know, water doesn't flow uphill. So if you're taking water off of lots A and B, the 2 lots that are being proposed, you're not going to be able to hook up to that storm system anyway. Am I misunderstanding that or understanding that, or could you pump?
Your worship, I'm not that familiar with the sites. They do fall towards the lake, essentially in grade. So there may be a potential to take the roof leaders, depending on where the house is sited, and put that storm water into the new storm system.
Okay.
But foundation drainage is probably not an option. It probably has to go to pits or some sort of collection. Having the storm sewer extended, as mentioned earlier by one of the neighbors, it doesn't alleviate any of the problems down the street, but it helps to bring it closer to that solution.
And my last question is probably to the Director of Development Services. The reason that work wasn't done in the past is because of our bylaws that allow infill with a single lot subdivision without triggering what a 2-lot subdivision or 3-lot subdivision has triggered. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's an exemption in the subdivision servicing bylaw. For example, this lot here, 1501, was created by a boundary adjustment, and a boundary adjustment doesn't trigger offsite works and services. And across the street, this property was recently subdivided, and it's too small to create more than 2 additional lots, so that qualifies for the infill exemption too. And further down 16th, at the corner of 11th, there's another subdivision underway, and that property did not qualify for the exemption, and that's why you see sidewalks being built along 16th and all the other works and services required.
So it is our own bylaw that allowed that lot to be subdivided and not create the need to put in the storm at that time.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
I'll pass, thank you, Worship. My questions were answered.
Okay. Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship. And one of my 2 questions was answered too, but I do have one. It's really, I guess, maybe between the between staff and the applicant, because when you consider the cost of a study and a report to find out where water will flow and how safely it will flow and where it will flow, and then a drainage plan, and then you compare that to the cost of the upgrades to the storm sewer, I'm just wondering if there's, would it not, I'm just, maybe I'm asking the applicant and the agent, is there a comparison there? In other words, would it not be cheaper for the applicants to just pay for the storm sewer?
It's a great question, Your Worship, and I don't have the answer to that because we don't have the information. We've laid out the requirements of the bylaw, and we do have a cost estimate for extending the storm sewer. It's approximately $8,350. Could be a little bit more than that, could be less. That's a ballpark estimate provided by the applicant.
Yeah.
We don't have an estimate from the applicant saying how much a geotechnical engineer report and design and covenant would cost for that.
Yeah, I understand that too, without actually having a geotechnical engineer go out and study and do the report. I'm just, could we get would the applicant like to comment on that? Like, I'm just, $8,300 in the scheme of the project as a whole is not a great number. However, $8,300 by itself is a great number. I understand that. I'm just wondering if you've thought about that, and really is that waiving that requirement really economically in the best interest of the applicant? I guess that's what I'm saying.
I understand, thank you. My understanding is we'll have to do the geotechnical report as well regardless. So we'd be looking at both the upgrade and the geotechnical report.
And then do one of the two, hook up or a drainage plan, right?
Yeah, and possibly with the drainage plan, we may be able to then put some of it back into the store, but we don't have the report done. We haven't done anything.
Okay. And okay, I'll save for my comments later.
Okay.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
So hearing no further submissions, and we've had our questions to staff, I'm going to close this public hearing, and then we will have our comments and we'll vote on it. Okay. So this public hearing is closed. I'm calling for comments from council. Councillor Jameson? Oh, sorry. You'll have to push your button again.
I'm still thinking.
Oh, you're still thinking, okay. So do we have any comments? Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment to the motion as presented. and I would like to make an amendment to a 50% cash contribution to the stormwater instead of the waiving.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Wallace Richmond. Okay, then speaking to the amendment.
Just speaking in support, there's always give and take in subdivisions, and these are large lots, and I understand that there will be stormwater and there will be stormwater issues, but historically we've always requested something for those things, and we're the waiver of the 100 to 150 mil water line upgrade, I believe is a pretty significant savings, and I don't think it will affect the neighborhood as much. This stormwater issue is something that affects the neighbors and affects the neighborhood, and I feel that this development, even if it's dealt with rock pits or, you know, a geotechnical stormwater management plan, I still feel that this contribution will affect the neighborhood. And I know it's not all of it, and I know $8,000 when you're talking about, you know, lots that are worth $150,000 to $250,000, or, you know, it's small, relatively speaking. It's $2,000 a lot, but they'll pay that for underground hydro or electrical or whatever. But I think it's important to the neighborhood that they at least contribute. So, and the issue's been raised with us at council, so we'll maybe make it a priority as a stormwater management plan for us at budget time. But I think it's important that with this development, we make them contribute.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Louise did.
Okay, here, yes, sorry. Okay, speaking to the amendment, Councillor Flynn?
I was gonna have general comments, so I didn't think about speaking to the amendment, so I'll maybe delay and come back to speak to the amendment.
Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand the dollar significance of the amendment. So the amendment is for 50% of the extension of the storm sewer, and the estimate of the storm sewer is $8,350 approximately. So we're talking about, say, $4,500. Do I understand that correctly, approximately?
Half of 8,350.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's what I thought. Thank you very much. In hearing that, I will support that amendment, and will also, at budget time, put in our half, or at least attempt to put in our half as well, so that we can at least get that section done.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have anything further on the amendment? Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship. These problems existed before this development was proposed, and I think that's an important point. However, the problem will persist if we don't do something about it. And we've already heard from the neighbors, you know, the difficulties that can occur there. I've always been a proponent of finding alternate ways of getting water back into the ground rather than into the pipes every time. I think it's a good idea where it works. And to be really honest, I'm 50-50 on whether it's going to work here. And the reason I say that is because water, as Councillor Flynn astutely pointed out, runs downhill. And we know where it's going to end up. And so we've already, if I'm not mistaken, this phase of the road on Lakeshore is already at a high risk. So I think we need to do our job and put the least amount of water back into the ground to flow downhill to Lakeshore as possible. And so this amendment, I think, will alleviate some of the financial pain. And I think that the other $4,000 the city can and should pay. And I will go along with the amendment.
Okay. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Worship. I want to thank everybody for presenting, and I'm struggling in the sense that quite often when we have a rezoning and then a DP and all that, you never know which should go first and how to deal with your comments. So my comments on the amendment are, a lot of what I want to say would be in after the amendment's result is determined, but I will support the amendment because I think the alternative isn't a cost sharing. It's probably that the developer will be asked to pay all of it. So I think in order for this to be a win-win, I don't want to minimize $4,500 or $4,000 for the developer, because that's what I find always interesting at this table is people that have owned that property in their family for years and want to split off one piece for a person that they know that wants to buy one lot and split off another are called developers. I think we are, though, recognizing that. So again, I'm not speaking to the amendment right now. I will vote in support of the amendment and then speak to the amended motion after that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. Briefly, I will vote in support of the amendment because I know nobody wants to pay for things they don't use. I understand that. But I also know that that's when subdivision occurs, that's when the infrastructure is built. Now, the boundary adjustment to the south and the subdivision to the east, they got a free pass on this because of the nature of the rule. So I feel like the compromise is to split it down the middle with a 50% contribution.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything further on the amendment? Okay, hearing none, then I will call the question on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And then the motion as amended, Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, thanks. I'll support this subdivision and the variances that go with it. And thanks for the compromise on the stormwater. As Councillor James has said, it's going to be our job to get the water out of the ground and into the pipe and down to the lake. The less water we can, if you look at this, the less water we can have on those lower lots, I think will be the best result for the longevity of Lakeshore Drive, which we've always known is an issue. So with time, I think we will get the road reserve that's required on the lakeshore frontage, whether we have to expropriate it or if there's a development that comes in and takes that over, because it is still a large parcel and that close to town, something will happen with it. And so I'm confident with that. Until that development happens, I don't know if we'll need that upgrade on the water line from 100 to 150 mil, but to get the water out of the ground, get the water into the pipes at that point, I think is in the best interest of the neighborhood. And come budget time, I will be looking to support a stormwater upgrade on that street from the new development on the corner down to this existing storm line so that we can do that for the residents. So I will support the variances on the motion as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Again, thank you everybody for coming to present, and I do want to make it really clear that if this was a developer who was building, how many lots could be built there, Director of Development Services, on the size of that property? You know, R1 development approximately?
So,
Doesn't, okay, sorry.
yeah, it's 2.75 acres. It's one hectare. Under R1, you're allowed to have a maximum of 22 units per hectare, but you couldn't fit 22 units on there.
Okay, so just to be clear, if this was a true development, one, we'd be getting the road reserve, we'd be getting all the dedications, we'd be getting all the improvements. Like I said, at this table, we call people that are developers, and I don't think the GOMs are developers, but we call them developers because they are breaking up a piece of property. I think the covenant protects us to get what we need in the future for Lakeshore. Who knows when that will happen? I think waiving the water main upgrade makes sense in this situation, but would certainly not make sense if there was 22 lots going there. I think the compromise that we've made with the half of the cost for the storm extension is a fair compromise. And I will support at budget the other half of that to make sure it happens this year. So I think this is a win-win-win for everybody. Again, it's not developers making a 22-lot subdivision. It's people making 3 lots out of a great piece of property that I got a great tour of and really understood a lot better. And I do want to remind everybody that the reason it wasn't done on the other side, and I was leaning towards the taxpayers paying all $8,000, is because we created a bylaw that allows a single lot. These people happen to have one more lot coming off, and therefore I think it's fair to ask them to pay half of that. So I will vote in favor and wish the GOMs well, And it's a beautiful piece of property with 2 really nice lots coming off of it. And I do want to talk about that rainstorm event, not to minimize it, but it was probably, Rob and I were talking about a 50-year event. So anything we can do to try to help that area against a 50-year event, but I think we could spend that $8,000 next week and not prevent what happened in an event like we had in September. So, but I will vote in favor and thank everybody for their input, and good luck.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks to presenters. And thank you to the GOMS for working through a process that they don't always work through, and I know it's not easy the first time. You know, what we wrestle with at this table often is the subdivision servicing bylaw, of course, is formed assuming some type of maximum density to development. And I think Tom talked a little bit about the Walters development on the other end of this road, and that's an excellent example because I believe there's 6 lots going in on a smaller piece of property than this. And in those instances, the affordability of doing 100% of the servicing is there because of the number of lots. And so when there's larger lots divided like this, which are more in character with the area, the affordability is less. Not to say that it's not still expensive, because there's $54,000 in development charges that the GOMS are going to have to do, and that's before they do anything on their own property. So it's not cheap. So we try to balance between making it affordable and densifying a little bit while still keeping the area, the development in the area in character. So that's the kind of balance that we're working at. I think the half of the cost on the storm sewer main, which is what we talked about. The other reason I supported the half, and it's not that much money, is the GOMS may well end up having to hook up to that. It's possible. And so I think overall they may be in a better position than not paying for it, because if the geotech says they have to put the stormwater from the roof into the storm sewer main and the storm sewer main's not there, that will be awkward. So I think it's fair. I appreciate the neighbors coming and talking, because I certainly understand your concerns. It sounds to me at this table that the council feels it is fair that the developer pays half and the general taxpayer pays half, and I support that as well. So hopefully we'll have met at least part of what your concern was. As far as the development and the other variances that have been waived, I think the covenant, as Councillor Flynn talked about, certainly covers the Lakeshore Road piece. And we know in talking to the GOMS that if we insisted on the Lakeshore Road piece, there wouldn't be any development there at all, because they were not prepared to do that, and that's perfectly fair. So I think overall, I think we've balanced it as well as we can. I think it's fair, provides homes for 2 more people in a very nice area. So I will support the motion as amended.
Thank you. Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship, and so much has been said that's probably worthy of repeating, but I won't. Graham, this would be a great case study for your class, wouldn't it? Like the whole process and where you started and where you end up. And so, like I said, so much has been said. I think any variance or subdivision or development along this stretch of Lakeshore, I think from now on is going to have to go back and consider that report that was tabled a couple weeks ago. It's always been, I have to be really honest, I've sat at this table for 10 years and I've had my fingers crossed the whole time that nothing is ever going to happen on Lakeshore. And it's a piece of road that we're very concerned about. And one of the variances requested, of course, was to not have to connect to storm. And it looks like we've settled that. I agree with the other comments about the water main. I don't think that's one of the real challenges of having a property that has 2 frontages. You know, and we've seen this before, where there's a request or a need or a demand to run services sometimes to both sides of the property, when in fact one side will never use it and one might. And but it's not a problem for me on this one to waive. And the covenant that's that's required is necessary. I think that, I think we've done a compromise here that certainly us at this table can live with. I hope you can, because as been stated, the western portion of the property, the integrity is still there. It's a beautiful west-facing piece of property. 2 more lots facing the other way. 2 more families maybe in that neighborhood, in a great neighborhood. So I will support the amended motion.
Okay, thank you. So thank you to council for your consideration of this matter, and thank you to those that came out and spoke. And I will call the question on the motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Administrator?
Your worship, the next item is variance permit 483 for the property at 611 Shuswap Street Southwest. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Harrison, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that VP 483 be authorized for issuance for strata plan KAS 2956 to vary zoning bylaw 2303 as follows: reduce the minimum setback of a principal building from the rear parcel line from 5 to 0.76 meters.
Development Services? Oh, sorry.
Your worship, this is another development variance permit application for the property located at 611 Shuswap Street Southwest. This is the property of the Greystone condominium, a 16-unit multi-level condominium that at one time was going to be part of a 2-phased condominium development. And the idea was that the second phase would be developed on the remainder parcel, which is a separate parcel, addressed at 615 Shuswap Street. The building is not set back 5 meters from the west lot line. It is as close as 0.76 meters at this point here. And the original developers, Excel Construction Limited, who are represented by Rick Semenzen and Bill Laird, who are in attendance today, they have interest in the remainder here, and they would like to separate the remainder completely from the Greystone strata development. And in order to separate the phases, and I can't really think of a better word, but divorce the property completely from the strata, they have to go through a process. And when they asked for my opinion on this as the approving officer, I suggested that the first thing they should do is apply for a variance so that this building would be in conformance with the zoning bylaw if it were to separate. Because under the phase plan, this property boundary would have been dissolved. So there'd be no property boundary here with the 2 condos. So it's pretty straightforward. There's no building code issues with fire or spatial separations. And I don't see any impact on the property to the south. We did receive some correspondence from this property owner with concerns about the setback variance. But personally, I don't see any impact on this property because the variance has to do with this west lot line adjacent to Greystone.
Okay, thank you. So I will be calling for submissions, calling for a first time for submissions. Would the applicant like to speak?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Bill Laird, 2185 Fifth Avenue Southeast. We had the privilege, my partner and I, Rick Semenzen, had the privilege of attending the public hearing a week ago, and this was discussed at that time. And as Director of Services has just pointed out, the portion of the first phase, which is close to the property line, is actually a concrete bunker which will be below grade. Hence why the building code is, or the setbacks are not the issue that they appear on the drawing. So I will answer any questions if there are any.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? I don't see any at this time, so please have a seat. There may be questions later.
Thank you. Okay. Just in case I don't come back, I don't know if this is appropriate, but thank you all for the time that I have been here for the last 4 years visiting with you. Really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best. particularly our mayor. Thank you.
Calling for a second time for submissions. Does anyone else have anything to say? Calling for a third time for submissions. Okay, seeing none. Do we have any questions for staff? Did we have any written submissions on this? Okay. Okay. Seeing none, did we have any written submissions on this?
We do. We do, Your Worship. And they're referred to by the Director of Development Services. I think we all have copies of a letter from Jay Hanlon and also from Sharon Padista. So we've had those in advance. I believe everyone has read them.
Okay. So do we have any questions for staff? Okay. Councillor Harrison, oh no, we were just speaking before. So I will close this public hearing. We'll have comments and then we'll vote. So this public hearing is closed. And so do we have any comments? Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And we did talk about this at planning. I think the variances that are asked for here are very minor, and they're even more minor in nature given the situation at that building, as has been explained to us. And also it fronts on a piece of property that's owned by the owners of both properties. And so I'll support the motion and the variances as requested.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further comments? Okay, seeing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Administrator?
Your Worship, the next item is variance permit 484 for the property at 2281 Auto Road Southeast. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Wallace Richmond, seconded by Councillor Flynn, that VP 484 be authorized for issuance for Lot 11, Plan EPP 75660 to vary subdivision and development servicing bylaw number 4163 as follows. Waive the requirement to upgrade the north half of the Auto Road Southeast frontage to the interim urban arterial standard. Reduce the requirement for a cash contribution equivalent to 100% of the estimated cost for the required water main extension to a 50% cash contribution. Waive the requirement for a cash contribution equivalent to 100% of the estimated cost for the required sanitary sewer main extension. And waive the requirement for a cash contribution equivalent to 100% of the estimated cost for the required storm sewer extension.
Development Services?
Your Worship, the property owner is Mr. Bowers, and his agent is Brown Johnson Land Surveyors. And the proposal is to, the original proposal is to subdivide off one lot off this large property that also double fronts two roads. It fronts onto 4B and Auto Road to the south. And the proposal for subdivision is to create this proposed Lot A here. And the proposed variance is to waive the requirement to upgrade the water main to 100% cost of that, and also to not have to extend the storm sewer main from this northwest corner of proposed Lot A to the south to the future property line of Lot A, and also to not have to extend the sanitary sewer main along the same right-of-way. This proposal looks complicated on paper, but just like the first variance we looked at, it triggers a whole bunch of servicing requirements, including upgrading Auto Road. Staff support the request to not have to upgrade Auto Road in lieu of a covenant being registered saying no further subdivision until fully serviced. There's road reserve covenants that will be registered on the property as part of the subdivision process, and I have no concerns with the proposed variances.
Okay, thank you. So again, calling for a first time for submissions. Would the applicant like to speak?
We'll answer any questions that may come up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Calling for a second time for submissions. Does anyone want to speak to this? Calling for a third time for submissions. We didn't have any written submissions on this, did we? And there was no written submissions. Do we have any questions for staff? Councillor Flynn?
At planning, we discussed this in a fair bit of detail, and staff's recommendation was to defeat the motion and amend it. Could staff, should we move the amendment now or wait till the hearing is closed?
You could do either.
I think maybe I'll move the amendment now, just so we can discuss it.
Second by Councillor Eliason.
And that amendment really just deals with the covenant, I believe. But I think staff has the wording for that if you want to need to read it, or?
Can you?
Sure. So it's moved by Councillor Flynn, second by Councillor Eliason, that item 1I be replaced with the following: waive the requirement to upgrade the north half of the Otter Road southeast frontage to the interim urban arterial standard, subject to registration of a covenant prohibiting further subdivision until the north half of Otter Road southeast is upgraded to city standards.
So speaking to the amendment,
Yeah, it's actually very interesting how similar this is, yet different than the previous one we dealt with this evening. So again, this is being called a development, and the people applying are being called developers, even though they're just breaking off one lot. They're giving us road dedication. There's no question that this piece of property could have significant development potential in the future, and I live right near here and see the for sale sign, and who knows what may happen. But the good news is taxpayers in the city are protected by registering this covenant, so that if there is any future more dense development, these improvements will occur. So that's why we need the covenant, very similar to the first item on our agenda tonight.
okay, thank you. Do we have anything further on the amendment? Seeing none, then I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And then the motion as amended. What I'll do is I will close this public hearing and then we'll have comments. So I'll close this public hearing. Now we'll have comments on the motion as amended. Okay, seeing no comments, then I'll call it. Oh, Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Happy to support this. Important to point out that it's not never, it's just not now, and that redeveloping it, I guess I would call it a legacy lot like this will take a long time. And so the preparations are being done to put a road through it, to turn it into a subdivision, but in the meantime, the process of having the owners live in a home on the northern piece of the property doesn't mean that the services won't be provided, just means that they don't have to pay for it up front, but they will eventually all be provided. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, I will also vote in support, but I do want to mention, again, in our community with topography, lake, mountains, highway, train, ALR land, it's difficult to add lots. And I just want to thank staff for working with developers, in hashtags developers or in quotations, to make these type of opportunities move forward, and also at the same time protect the taxpayers for the future improvements that need to happen if densities become higher. So staff's done a great job on this one as well as the previous application.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anything further? Hearing none, I will call the question on the motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your Worship, the next item is variance permit 485 for the property at 110 2nd Street Southeast. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Harrison, that VP 485 be authorized for issuance for Lot 8, Plan 392 to vary zoning bylaw 2303 as follows. Reduce the minimum setback from an interior side parcel line from 2 to 1.25 meters. Reduce the minimum setback from a front parcel line adjacent to a lane from 1.2 to 0.96 meters. And reduce the minimum setback of a projected roof eave from 0.6 to 0.1 meters.
Development Services?
Your Worship, this is a property located at 110 2nd Street Southeast, owned by the Fennels. And it's been under application to rezone to R8 residential suite zone. That bylaw has received 3 readings. And before I get into the variances, we're at a point now where city staff can approve the release of the covenant that's been untitled. They've brought this accessory building up to a point that it satisfies what we want for building code. We appreciate the work that Mr. Fennell has done for that. But these variances being applied for is really just to have the proposed detached suite meet the setbacks of the R8 zone. And basically the existing building, it is what it is. It's there where it is. And the setbacks would legalize the siting of the building and the setbacks to meet the R8 zone.
Okay. Thank you. So I will be calling again 3 times for submissions, starting with the applicant. Did the applicant wish to speak?
No, this time I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Calling for a second time for submissions. Does anyone want to come forward and speak to this? Calling for a third and final time. Anyone wishing to speak to this? Hearing none. We didn't have any written submissions. No written submissions. Okay. Do we have any questions for staff? Hearing none. Then I will close this public hearing. Ask for comments. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Mr. Fennell, for your work on this. I know we've been hitting the ball back and forth. You've hit it back to us now. Thank you. I think the developer here bought a property that needed some work and had the possibility of having a second residence in an area where in the city we want to densify and have more housing because it's very walkable. In order to encourage developments like this in the downtown, they have to be affordable. And so certainly having a second residence is a big mortgage helper. As the Director of Planning said, this building is situated where it is. Regardless of whether we passed a variance or not, the eaves would be in the same place and the walls would be in the same spot. So I think we've come this far and we need to support what developer is doing, knowing that it's going to provide a house for someone, knowing that there is parking room provided there, and rather than take away from the community down there, I think it's actually going to be an addition. So I will support the variances as requested.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Jameson.
Thanks, Your Worship, and here's an example of patience winning out. I mean, it's back and forth, and there was upgrades needed, and they were done. I think it would be neither fair nor necessary to do anything except pass these variances and make sure this happens, because Councillor Harrison's already stated this is a great place for a second dwelling on a piece of property. So I will support.
Thank you. Do you have anything further? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your Worship, the next item is DP 421 for the property at 131 Harbourfront Drive. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that DP 421 be authorized for issuance for Lot 2, Plan EPP 69106, in accordance with the drawings dated July 27, 2018, and that issuance be withheld subject to the receipt of a letter of credit in the amount of $7,500 for landscaping.
Development Services?
Your Worship, this is a form and character development permit application for the vacant property located at 131 Harbourfront Drive Northeast, owned by 566562 BC Limited, represented by Marvin Skirpin. And Mr. Skirpin applied for a development permit back in the summer. And this aerial photo shows the property right next to the Prestige Inn. This photo was taken in 2016. Since then, there's been 3 fourplexes built on this portion of the land. And what's being proposed on the commercial pink portion, well, it's actually its own property. The C6 zoned portion is a 6-level 15-unit condominium, as shown in the development permit drawings attached to your report. And these drawings went to the city's design review panel last month. And those drawings were supported by the design review panel. The owner has hired an architect from MQN Architects, Mr. Brian Queering, who is here today to talk about the details of the design if there's questions on that. And the proposal meets the city's form and character guidelines for this development. There's no variances being asked for with this development, no height variances, no parking variances, no setback variances. It meets the C6 zoning regulations.
Okay, thank you. So I will be calling again 3 times for submissions, beginning with the applicant. Did the applicant have anything they'd like to say?
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Brian Quiring, MQN Architects. It's pretty self-explanatory in terms of what was presented. Definitely a little bit more challenging of a site than we had originally expected, balancing the parking access. But we feel pretty good about the design. We think that it's sensitive to what's been constructed on the property in terms of material and color, texture, finish. And the building is articulated, to break down the mass so that it's a little, so it's in keeping with what's going on and in the surrounding urban fabric. Yeah, we're quite proud of the design. We think it's going to be a nice asset to the community, and yeah, here to answer questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions for the developer?
I can always come back after.
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead and have a seat.
All right, thanks.
Calling for a second time for submissions. Did someone else want to come and speak to this? Just state your name and address.
Nancy Moore, I live at 160 Harbourfront. Quite nervous.
That's okay.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to address this hearing. And first, I'd like to say that I'm not against well-planned, respectful development. And by that, I mean development that takes into consideration the needs, concerns, and values of all stakeholders. I didn't oppose the first phases of this property development at all. Now, if you drive around our city, you'd be hard-pressed to find a building of 6 stories anywhere. And for the city to approve one on the shoreline, I think would be a precedent-setting travesty. I believe the effects of this development on the riparian area, fish, bird, and wildlife populations would also be detrimental. I think the waterfront is a common asset to the community, and that and the pier are huge tourist attractions for this area and could be adversely affected. Parking is a huge issue in Salmon Arm. There's substantial visual evidence of the lack of planning about parking already in this community, especially adjacent to multi-unit complexes. The streets are clogged with parked vehicles. The referendum for the underpass funding was successful, so when it goes forward, we will lose the parking currently in front of the Prestige on Harbourfront, as well as those on Ross Street.
Can I just interrupt just for a moment? I understand all of your concerns. But all of those, they meet all the requirements for everything there that you're talking about. The only thing we're looking at now is how it, the form and character. They have parking?
They have 1 space per unit, which when I stopped by City Hall on Friday, I was told by an engineer that, well, if you own more than 1 vehicle, you wouldn't buy there. I think that's really naive. And I think that it's ignoring the issue of parking, just so that this can go ahead at any cost. I'm not opposed to a building going there, just I think maybe a few less units might be better.
Okay.
Thanks.
I appreciate that. Just I understand that it does meet all the parking requirements, and what are the parking requirements for anybody building something like this?
For something like this, high-density residential or upper floor dwelling units in this case, 1.25 stalls per unit, which is the same as a high-density residential zoning as well.
So we're not making any special effort just for this one. It does meet the requirements. So I understand your that it's a concern for you, but it does meet what is in the bylaw. So we're not making any special concessions, so.
Although the parking spots over and above the 15 per unit are designated on the website as small cars. So, I don't know.
And that happens also.
We do have an allowance for small car parking. I know the architect examined our bylaw requirements very closely to make sure that it met the requirements.
So, I understand your concern, but the only thing we're dealing with here is the form and character, so. Okay. So thank you, though. Thank you for expressing. I know it's hard, and it's hard to come forward and speak, but I appreciate that you took the time to do that. So I'm calling again for submissions. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say? Just want to ask one more time, does anybody have anything they'd like to say on the form and character? Okay. Did we have any written submissions on this one?
No written submissions.
No written submissions. Do we have any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, then I will close this public hearing. And then comments, do we have any comments from council? Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think it's really important to note that this was a form and character development permit approval. And the memo and the staff memorandum that we received, under comments for building department, it meets all BC Building Code requirements. One of my friends in the gallery asked me about the fire department and the height, and in the fire department in the memo, it lists no concerns. Engineering department, no concerns. The design review panel is an independent panel that we at the city ask to look at multifamily developments and major developments to get their independent input about look, design, and all of those things. And they have, at their September 20th meeting, approved this. And from the planning department's point of view, it meets all requirements with no variances. We've been dealing tonight with variances and exceptions to rules, and this one has no variances. Thank you for your presentation. I know you were nervous, and I empathize with some of the things you brought up, but the fact is there isn't even a parking variance being applied for here, and it meets our parking requirements for high density developments. And I think the 1.25, I should have asked staff, this matches pretty much every development that's happened down there that's higher density. So I understand the concerns, but the bylaw is being met and we're just dealing with the development permit. So I will vote in favor. I like the looks of the building. And I think the use of this piece of land has been very creative, and the previous duplexes have done very well and look good. And I think this is a good use for density purposes of that piece of land. So I will vote in favor of the development permit.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. First of all, I'd like to thank the developer for bringing forward a development that is without variance, because as you know, that makes it easier for us. And I understand the concern. Even if council thought that this building was too tall, and even if council thought there wasn't enough parking spaces, there's nothing that we could do about it at this hearing, because it fits the C6 zoning. The C6 zoning says you're allowed to build to 6 stories, and you have to have a certain number of parking spaces. Really what we're being asked tonight is, do you like the look of the building? That's what we're being asked up at this table. And so my answer is I like the look of the building. And so there's no variances requested. I will support the motion as requested.
Thank you. Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Councillor Harrison, for your comments on that, because it's a lot of what I wanted to say, but I had a few other comments. I think this is the third time, maybe the fourth time we've looked at a development permit or development application or drawings for this particular site. And every time we've approved them or given them the go-ahead, and it turns out it's not what we originally expected when we saw this property, but it's what the market will bear. And our job is to increase density in our dense zones. That's what our official community plan says. And so, like Councillor Harrison said, they can go that high, they can go that big, they can have that site coverage, they can have the parking. The building to me looks good. And hopefully this is going to spur on other buildings and other developments within the area and create a more vibrant downtown and create more business downtown. People will only need a car because they can walk to and from downtown, even though I know some people who live down there who choose to drive downtown, but maybe with the underpass they can walk to work. Don't know. But I think the biggest thing that we're gonna find out from this is, in not form and character point of view, but I think the Prestige will have to do something about their parking in the short term, because you're right, there will be some traffic down there, there will be some parking issues, and their hotel guests will need a place to park, especially if the building across the street or the property across the street from you guys goes ahead, the one kitty corner. So that will be an exciting time for downtown Salmon Arm, an exciting time for the city, but again, it won't come without controversy. So as far as form and character goes, I think it's a nice looking building. I think it'll match, and I think it'll be an asset for the neighborhood, and I hope that the market does bear this one out and we're able to see this come to fruition this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship, and it's great to be talking about this development, the first meeting after a referendum passes. This is the first, really. This is what we hope will happen on the foreshore. And I have to make the comment that when I sat as a councillor nearly 30 years ago, no, I haven't been a councillor since, but 30 years ago, I was afraid stuff like this was going to happen. And 30 years hence, I'm going, this is what we need to happen, because our town is growing. It's growing, and there's a market for these, and I hope that it's constructed and the units are on sale and ready to go in time for this cycle to make sure that that there's profit here for the developer. I think that's important. We have to consider that. But there's other considerations. It's already been said, there's no variances. It's zoned appropriately. It's a modern design that fits in with what we have down there already. And the parking, you know what? We live in a car crazy culture. And the cars are going to come whether we provide, it doesn't matter how many parking spots I think we provide on developments, we're going to fill them all and then more. So parking is not going to be, it's going to be an issue, as traffic is too. But everything okay over there?
Good.
But I think that we can live with it, and we have to, because the traffic is only going to increase down there as the construction increases. So I will support this application.
Thank you. Do we have anything further from council? Hearing none, then I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your Worship, the next item is the question and answer period.
Do you have any questions?
I have a question. I guess I didn't understand what this whole hearing was about. I thought it was for public comment, but only on the appearance of the building seems a bit bizarre to me. That's all.
Yeah. I know you have to, it's a difference between, it's a.
So did you already have the public comment meeting and I missed it?
We can't take any more information after this hearing is closed, so. Yeah.
Did I miss it?
We can come and talk to you later. It was at planning too, yeah, so. Administrator,
So I have a motion to adjourn.
all in favor? You can add that. I just had to stop it.